In a quiet Arizona town, Willie Inman, just 21, used a set of guiding principles when appointing himself judge, jury, and executioner of the men that he killed.
My family's been anti-Semitic for over 2,000 years. That ain't gonna change.
Inman kept company with members of a white supremacist organization, one which defines all too clearly who its enemies are.
To us, the Aryan Brotherhood, the gang here in America, that's a total slap in the beliefs of our country.
If someone steps out of line, the self-styled vigilante felt that he had every right to kill.
He's another drag on society. Another one that society won't miss. He's cleaning up the town.
Inman's descent to serial killer status began on a ranch, which became his shooting gallery.
Willie didn't hesitate to kill animals, and he was slowly progressing to that stage.
Willie Inman saw himself as an avenging deliverer of justice. But what was really going on inside the mind of a serial killer? Small town Arizona. Fewer than 6,000 people live in this community, and not too much happens in this part of the world.
In Arizona, in the southwest corner, along the border of Mexico, lies two little towns, Springerville and St. John's. These two towns are like many towns across the United States. 9-to-5, working class, blue-collar people.
St. John's is a small town. There's not too many people. Everyone that does live here either works for the school, the jail, or on a ranch. And it's a good place to live if you don't like a lot of company. The majority of the people are nice and caring people.
In August 2009, a teenager goes missing. His name, Ricky Flores.
Ricky Flores is a 16-year-old troubled kid, some might describe him as. He's had some drug problems, messing around with drugs, some criminal mischief, some people would say maybe a little local town hooligan, but nothing major. But who else is Ricky Flores? He's somebody who was starting to turn his life around. Got off of drugs, did his time in juvie, was now back out on the street.
Married, too, to Jessica.
One of his first real relationships, and he really loved her. She loved him. They had a kid together, a daughter. You know, all he really wanted to do was support his family the best he could at 16 years old. He just wanted to show some sort of initiative that he was working towards something better to better himself and put his family in a better position.
So disappearing was not what was expected of Ricky. Detective Lucas Rodriguez called in on the Flores family to gauge why Ricky's mum, Maura, was so concerned.
I talked to Maura for about 45 minutes to an hour, asking her, and she said some of the strange things that, well, some of the things that concerned her is that when Ricky would leave or something, he would take clothes, but he didn't take any clothes at this time.
The Flores family and the police were particularly worried because of who Ricky had last been seen with, someone a little older that he knew.
I knew the last person he was with. I just made one connection. So did they, and William Inman.
William Inman. Inman, different kind of kid. Mostly, I know him as saying hi to him, seeing him out in the street, and he'll approach me. I say, "What's up? How you doing?" He says, "Okay." He just a little odd, dresses mostly in camouflage, army fatigues, carries a knife, just likes hunting, the army, likes his guns, and that's pretty much Willie.
Guns played a big part in the life of Willie Inman, a fact which a friend of his and of Ricky's couldn't exactly miss.
He liked his guns a lot, you know, like probably gave him a sense of, you know, power. You know, he would talk about them all the time.
Linda Papadopoulos has been pulling together the evidence about Willie Inman, trying to understand what made him tick.
We know that William Inman grows up with a family basically neglects him. They had problems with the law.
I know that his mom wasn't around for a lot of his life.
So this little boy is very much left to his own devices.
Most of the time I saw him alone or with friends. I never saw him with his family, I guess, per se. With his mom or dad or anything like that. Mostly it was him and friends and stuff like that.
Willie spent most of his time at the ranch that his family owned a few miles out of town. There, he had constructed a makeshift firing range. Detectives had cause to occasionally call on Willie.
We came across a smell of death, or of a stench of something rotting, meat rotting. We knew that Willie was there because his car was there, but we walked around the ranch and calling for him and stuff like that, and we came a couple of a dead cow hanging. More sure probably Willie used it for meat, but he didn't own any cattle. From what I gather, Willie didn't hesitate to kill animals.
There was just something odd about Willie Inman. Nearly 10 years older than Ricky Flores and Joseph Elam, Willie Inman still hung around them, waiting for them to get out of school, dropping in on them when they were smoking drugs.
Yeah, I could always tell, you know, that guy, there's something wrong with him, you know, because, like, we're over here blazing and, you know, having a good time, laughing and stuff, and he's just, you know, talking about, you know, his grandpa and Nazi shit and whatever, you know.
His grandpa, Willie would tell them, was a German flying ace, a matter of Inman family pride. He'd tell that to the police one day, too.
My grandpa was the greatest Luftwaffe pilot any pilot ever existed. Only one to receive over 1,200 kills.
A telling piece of evidence for criminal profiler Donna Youngs.
In direct contrast to the lawlessness of an ill discipline of his parents, Inman did have this grandfather who seemed to have this Nazi background that to him would have seemed to be the very personification of authority and discipline, of standards, of idealism, of something to look up to in the way that he couldn't look up to his parents.
He was just a peculiar dude, you know, he was just off the wall and the stuff he would say and how he tried to present himself, you know. I didn't like him.
So that was Willie Inman in summer 2009. A peculiar dude, one who had been neglected as a child, with an obsession for his grandfather's Nazi past and for guns. He hung around with Ricky Flores too, and 8 days after he had last been seen, nobody knew where Ricky was.
I just had a bad feeling about it, you know, the whole time, you know, when we're talking with Jessica, we're talking with his mom, you know, I just had a bad feeling.
Ricky is missing. Ricky has people who love him as well. They've made a missing persons report with the St. John's Police Department. And the last person that they could track Ricky being with was Willie.
So I jumped in his patrol car, we went out there, and by luck, we met with Willie and his girlfriend Stony up there.
Stormy Williams, 20 years older than Willie, a troubled woman with learning difficulties.
Willie told me that he had taken, that they indeed, Ricky was at the ranch with him, and that they had gone, he talked to him about drugs and to stay away from drugs and stuff like that.
Willie may once have been a drug taker himself, but the older man wanted his younger friend to lay off the herb, as he called it. He didn't want Ricky to end up like Willie's mother.
My mother was like that. She loved her drugs, that's why I don't even talk to her anymore. It's been 7 years since I've talked to her. Straight out walked on her one day, kept telling me, oh, I fell off the bandwagon, whatever. Straighten your life up. Whole life she didn't. spent all the money on, before my dad was able to kick her out, spent all the money on drugs.
Oh, was that right?
And I didn't have nothing, no food, no nothing. But yeah, one time I remember Ricky was wanting to get off the crap, so I let him go out to my place for a couple of weeks and let him detox.
Inman sees himself as someone who is able to kind of, better people in some way, and he tries to better those that are younger than him. So he speaks to Ricky Flores, and he describes this in quite a lot of detail, and says to him, look, you need to, put your life back on track, you need to stop the drugs.
By the age of 21, the mind of Willie Inman seems to have settled on what people should and should not do.
Inman found solace in clear ideas, in concrete ideas, in black and white, in right and wrong, because everything that he'd known as a child was confused and messy. So he would have found, psychologically speaking, he craved a clear agenda, a clear set of principles, and it didn't matter what those principles were. The clearer, the more absolutist, the better.
The final brushstroke in creating a picture of Willie Inman in August 2009. What he thought right should be vigorously pursued, and what he thought was wrong should be punished. What was Willie's true purpose down on the ranch where he, his girlfriend Stony, and Ricky Flores had gone around August 20th? Whatever had happened that day, Willie was sticking to his story when he spoke with detectives. He had no more than warned young Ricky off drugs.
I could care less what music you listen to and what you like to do. Just the drugs, man. Leave them alone. I tried so many times.
He talked to him about drugs and to stay away from drugs and stuff like that.
That was what Inman said he was doing as he and Ricky Flores fooled around with guns on the ranch before moving on.
Then he said he took him back into town and dropped him off on 4th North and 13th West. He said that Ricky had received a phone call and says, hey, just drop me off here, I gotta bounce. Says Ricky pulled the car over and Ricky jumped out and took off.
And he bails out my back door, says, later, dog. We shake hands, and he leaves. And we drive from there, straight here through Springerville, from St. John's, the main road, right over to my girl's house, and we go to sleep for the night. And that is the last time I seen him.
Ricky Flores, 16, missing from home, and a friend of Willie Inman, a gun-obsessed admirer of a Nazi grandfather who wanted to set the world straight and who had a shooting range down on the ranch. Officer Lucas Rodriguez and a fellow detective didn't believe Willie Inman's story about dropping off Ricky Flores in St. John's.
We both had the same feeling that Ricky was hurt or that he was dead.
Ricky's friends were suspicious too, because they knew all about Willie Inman's dangerous obsession.
He was just one of those dudes that, probably found power, like he wasn't physically strong, so he had to, have guns and stuff like that.
Willie Inman soon gets another visit from the cops. A mind game was about to begin between Inman and disbelieving detectives.
I spent about 2 hours interviewing Willie. During that time, I questioned him again on the story. Willie stuck to his gun, saying that he had dropped Ricky off. I kind of pressured him a little bit more and asking him, what's going on, Willie? Come on, tell me where Ricky is. As the interview progressed, I can see a lot of deception signs on Willie.
Inman would later admit he was getting anxious about St. John's police.
I hate the St. John's police because they don't know anything. They don't even know the law.
Officer Lucas Rodriguez turned to a colleague in nearby Apache County, where murder squad detectives were based.
He goes, holy smokes, Lux, I think you're right. I think you're looking for a body, not somebody that's alive.
He set off for the home of Stormy Williams, where he suspected Willie Inman was hanging out.
Went to the Springerville and executed a search warrant. There was no arrest warrant, there was no nothing like that. Willie was free to go. We were just looking for more evidence and stuff like that.
Willie runs down to the police station, and he sits in this interview room, and he's panting, and he's out of breath, and he's all excited because he thinks that the Springerville police are going to get the St. John police off his back.
During that time, Willie went to the Springerville department there, and he spoke with Chief West.
Steve West was the chief of police at the Springerville police office. He'd taken a call from Stony complaining about police harassment at the hands of St. John's officers. Chief West first got a brief from Officer Lucas Rodriguez, then got back in touch with Stormy.
So what I did is I called up this young lady, his girlfriend, and I told her that they needed to let these guys, come over, and Mr. Inman had threatened that he had a gun. So I asked them if they'd feel safer, leaving the house and coming up to the police department. And she said yes. And I said, well, then you leave your house and come straight up to the police department.
Willie Inman's belief structure meant that for him, whatever had happened that day, he was in the right.
I try to be as law-abiding as possible.
Lucas Rodriguez, a St. John's police officer by contrast, had no right to be working in Springerville.
And I believe Willie was already talking to Steve West, and they had struck a rapport and stuff like that.
So bizarrely, he goes to the sheriff with the intention of kind of deflecting this focus on him and what he's done.
He walks in to see Chief West and complains.
So I'm tired of being harassed. They have no right coming to my girl's house, no right whatsoever. And last time they came here without a sheriff escort. They came in their St. John's police car out of jurisdiction. And they've broken the law. They searched her next door neighbor's house.
Willie builds up the Springerville police and says, you all should be handling what takes place in this town. You all are better than the St. John's police. Certainly you all can handle that. And Willie's trying to manipulate the Springerville police.
Chief Steve West was not about to be manipulated. He was about to hear a life story, and as he tried to win Willie's confidence, he listened attentively.
And I set Mr. Inman in a room by himself and advised the other law enforcement that I did have them there at that time.
Tell me a little bit about who you are. Who is this Willie? Who are you, Willie?
He was very edgy when we started talking about some of the murders, some of the homicides that potentially happened.
And Willie starts to talk, and he starts to describe his childhood and how he's overcome parents who shun their responsibilities of parents. He described how his only companion was his dog.
Willie offered a version of a young man with down-to-earth, old-fashioned American values, hard-earned values.
Have you been in the service?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
82nd Airborne, 21.
Wow. Gosh, when did you get out?
I got out when I was 18.
Inman would claim to have served in Afghanistan, to have killed many times. The military for Willie was a revered institution. According to psychologists, this was the classic behavior of somebody who deals in absolute right and absolute wrong, and it goes to the heart of understanding Willie Inman, the young man with a messy childhood.
When you have that confused background, you'll be looking for anything which makes the world simple, which makes the world safe, which makes it clear who is in the right and who is in the wrong, because you've grown up not knowing, not understanding what's right, who's right.
Somebody comes over there I know of, don't know his name, but I know he's the one supplying and using with them.
He describes how he views himself as a hero almost, but he describes how he looks at the dredges of society, the drug users, criminals.
He talked a lot about, he didn't like drugs and that he was more than willing to take drugs off the street, whatever it took. He was more than willing to do what was necessary to make sure that that kids on the street didn't receive drugs.
Was killing Ricky Flores necessary? If so, Willie was not about to admit it.
What St. John's PD is asking you is they're asking you if you know the whereabouts of Ricky.
Correct.
And what's Ricky's last name?
Flores.
Flores. Okay, so they're asking you if you know the whereabouts of Ricky Flores. They're saying what? That you were the last one to see him?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
And that I know something, and they keep pressuring me like I do know something, which if I didn't, I would tell them because I want them off my backs. I'm tired of being harassed. They have no right coming to my girl's house, no right whatsoever.
He is trying to convince the police chief that they're hermano, that they're brothers, that they both are crime fighters, that they both view the world in the same way, and that they are like one. And Willie just keeps talking. And the police chief skillfully keeps saying, and then, what else? Tell me more.
Like how he thinks Ricky Flores should behave.
No, service would do that boy good, though.
Think it'd get him straightened out?
Yeah, it would. I think so.
He has almost these sort of vigilante tendencies. So this idea of kind of righting wrongs of the world, he sees himself almost as this sort of anti-hero, kind of going out there and kind of making sure karma happens for the people that are doing wrong.
Inman reveals a lot during his recorded interview with Steve West.
During the interview, as we talked, it was really strange because Mr. Inman, he had this affinity, number one, as far as being calm, to why he was there. He didn't seem upset about that at all. But the other thing was he had this affinity to talk about Nazism.
My family's been anti-Semitic for over 2,000 years. That ain't gonna change.
Ricky Flores' girlfriend and mother to his child, Jessica, was the daughter of a man who was allegedly a member of a white supremacist group called the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas. His name, Jeffrey Johnson.
Ricky had gotten in trouble with Jessica a lot because he was not allowed to come and visit her or be around her or anything like that. So I believe at one point Mr. Johnson and Melissa Johnson, the mom of Jessica Johnson, got a restraining order against Ricky and not allowed him to come around and be around Jessica. Well, it didn't matter because Jessica loved Ricky and she would sneak out of the house as well and go meet with him and vice versa.
Which Mr. Johnson did not like.
They couldn't have their daughter associate with this brown-skinned Ricky Flores.
Inman had the means to kill down on the ranch. Willie knew Jeff Johnson. Did Inman have two motives for killing Ricky Flores? The first, to get rid of a drug user from the streets, and the second, to do the bidding of a known white supremacist, to help establish himself as someone the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas could take as one of their own, to gain a sense of belonging.
Although he would not have admitted it, even to himself, there would have been some hidden shame about his parents within Inman. So he would have been looking for an outlet, a way to direct that shame. So any organisation that gave him a weaker group, an inferior group, that labelled one part of society as weaker, gave him an outlet for the shame he felt towards his parents.
As the interview continued, it was not looking good for the Hispanic Ricky Flores, missing and last seen with Willie Inman.
You can ask me the same question they keep asking me. Where is Ricky? I'll tell you the same thing. I don't know.
Throughout his time inside Springerville Police HQ, there was something Willie Inman did not know about Stormy, his girlfriend.
Stormy's in the other room, and as part of the other plan, they're going to play each other against one another.
It was decided to tell Stormy that Willie had confessed to the homicide. Detective Nickel did present that kind of information to the idea to Stormy. And Stormy actually started talking and said yes, they had killed Ricky, and went into detail on how they had killed him and how they had taken him back to town and how they had buried him.
In the interview room, the mind game is up for Willie, and he's lost.
You don't talk until I ask you to talk, okay?
Yes, sir.
I know exactly what happened. I know where the body's at. I know where he was shot. I know where you buried him on the blue. I know where you burn him. I got your tire tracks. I got your shoe tracks.
What?
We finally got him to admit that he indeed did shoot this kid.
Just tell us what happened, Willie. That's the biggest thing. Run us through it.
Oh my God.
Well, I mean, stuff happens. We know that.
Yes. And I'm telling you, I did not want to kill the kid. It was not murder, I can tell you that much.
Okay.
My God, I can't believe it's
Just tell us
Well,
what
that's
was
okay. Yeah, just tell us the story.
He shot at me and hit my dad's truck, and I fired back. I didn't want to hit him.
Willie did disclose that the homicide had actually occurred at his ranch, and that he had shot Willie at the ranch. I believe he shot him in the head.
He said they were both out at the site east of St. John's, and that they were out there and they were target practicing. And they started shooting cans and whatnot, and Ricky wanted to shoot the rifle, and so he let him shoot the rifle, and Mr. Inman said that he was standing by his car and a bullet hit the window next to him. He said that he took that as an aggressive move, and he got his rifle and started firing at Ricky.
This was a story of self-defense. Willie, trying to dissuade young Ricky from being a drug user, had brought him out to the ranch. Whilst recreationally shooting on the firing range, things had just gone wrong.
So what does Willie tell the police? He reveals to them, yes, I'm the one responsible who killed Ricky Flores. And he goes on with a story, again, his superhero story. He doesn't like people who uses drugs. He was trying to help out the town. He was ridding society of somebody who wasn't worth anything. And that was his whole motivating purpose.
But that was not the story that Stormy Williams had told, and it was not true. Investigators soon uncovered that Inman thought killing Ricky Flores might make him money from the father of Ricky's girlfriend, Jeff Johnson.
You see, Ricky's girlfriend, her parents loved her. They hated Ricky.
It would not look good to Mr. Johnson that, since he's a white supremacist, that his daughter had a kid from a Hispanic kid.
They couldn't have their daughter associate with this brown-skinned Ricky Flores.
After shooting Ricky on the ranch outside Springerville, Inman and Stormy loaded Ricky's body onto the truck before heading to the Johnson family home in St. John's.
Then we simply moved to the presentation of the prey, the celebration, the victory, the plaudits, by taking the body to be shown to Johnson.
He had to move the body to St. John's because that is where he was going to get paid. He's not this superhero. He's greedy. This is all about the buck, the almighty dollar.
Hey, can I get that $5,000? You know, I killed Ricky. He's in the truck right now. You know, and the dad was like, you know, what the heck? Like, you know, that, like, get out of here. You know.
The whole reason for Willie bringing the body over into town in the beginning is just, instead of just going through the back roads and going away from town, was that he came over and showed proof to Mr. Johnson that he had actually taken care of the job and killed Ricky. William said that Mr. Johnson got mad at him for bringing the body, and that got $20 from him for gas, and that was all, and he took off.
Jeffrey Johnson denied ordering a hit on Ricky Flores. He may have made idle remarks about not liking him to Inman, He and his wife Melissa would eventually be found guilty of hindering the prosecution in the case of the murder of Ricky Flores. Jeff Johnson would be sent to jail for 7 years. Melissa given probation. Ricky Flores, in Inman's mind, was a drug user, so deserved to be punished. He was Hispanic and had fathered a child with a white girl, so deserved to die.
I think there is evidence to attest to the fact that he sees himself as this kind of vigilante figure, as someone that's going to kind of even the stakes. In the case of Ricky Flores, we know that his girlfriend's parents actually speak to him and say, you know, we think Ricky's a no-good, he's terrible for our daughter, and in fact takes the body to these parents of this girl to say, look what I've done, as if seeking some sort of, you know, approval, recognition, reward. So this very much feeds into this sense that he needed to belong, he needed to be acknowledged, he needed to have an identity as somebody that's contributing something.
He wanted to, you know, feel some sort of power. There's some messed up part in his head that, you know, said, if I can kill these people and, you know, people can't figure out about it, then I'm obviously doing something right. You know, I'm taking bad people off the street. That's what he claimed his thought process was.
Understanding Willie Inman is about appreciating his need to belong in the army, to be respected by a white supremacist group. As he was interviewed at Springerville, he also revealed that he wanted to belong with law enforcers.
I try to be as law-abiding as possible.
Inman was in the grip of what we call a revenge and mission narrative. And this is a storyline driving a person's life forward where they believe that it is their duty to right some wrong that has been done. Inman's mission was to get rid of what he called undesirables, anybody doing anything illegal or immoral in any way, according to his judgment.
Inman had contented himself that Ricky deserved to die, and Willie was the man to kill him. Had he reached the same conclusion about other people? As detectives probed Willie Inman about the death of Ricky Flores, they had 2 unsolved cases on file. Was William Nicholas Inman a serial killer? If guilty, he should confess, they told him. He might avoid the death penalty, even one day look forward to being released.
I spent 23 years doing murders. I've solved murders in this town right here on the reservation with the FBI and everywhere. I have people that are in prison writing me letters thanking me for putting them in a position to tell the truth. To this day, I got people that get out of prison because every time somebody gets out, they have to notify me.
Did Willie want to live? Yes, he did.
I'm afraid of death, period.
Two years before the murder of Ricky Flores, a 72-year-old had been found dead in his trailer on land adjacent to Willie Inman's ranch.
He actually lived at Elk Valley Ranch on lot 117, just east of St. John's. He was neighbors with a guy by the name of Stony McGaraga.
He had been murdered and been shot, and the homicide had gone unsolved since 2007.
Detectives were tipped off whilst interviewing Inman. Willie Inman was the killer.
Stony's murder will not seek the death penalty or murder one. Exact words. He said the clock is running. If you can help us on that murder.
I have no idea on that at all. I do not.
William McGaraga, known as Stony, had a troubled and troublesome past. He had pleaded guilty many years before to child molestation in New Hampshire when he'd been working with a scouting organization. He had also worked with young men using an alias of William Stony in Florida. Eventually, he turned up as Stony McGaraga in East Arizona. Willie learns of his past and that he has cash in his trailer.
This is a bad guy, you know, he's got lots of money, where a lot of people don't. You know, there's rumors about, you know, sexual misconduct with young people.
Weeks after confessing to the murder of Ricky, Inman decides to take up the offer of trading the truth of his crimes in exchange for his life. At this point, he becomes totally committed to telling the police everything.
He switches from seeing the police as the enemy to seeing the police as the people that he wants to get on side, and then suddenly we get the confessions, suddenly we get the complying with everything, trying to please the police.
With an accomplice, Willie had decided it was time to take the law into his own hands. Stony had moved to the wrong place, living next to a man with definite ideas of what should happen to bad guys, and one who had an arsenal of weapons.
The story of Stony, the child molester. Willie ridding society of a cancerous plague that would wreak havoc on the children in the community. The police are interested. And they're listening, and then they're letting him talk. And Willie becomes the instructor, and the detectives the students. Because school's in session, and Willie's gonna lead this lesson. And he describes in detail what he did to Stony.
He had shot him in his bed through the trailer window.
He describes how he sneaks up to the house while Stony's asleep.
If you kind of look at his method of killing, it's very military, right? So not only does he wear these fatigues, not only is he interested in the guns, but it's quite methodical. He kind of goes into the dead of night. It's as if it's a covert operation. He cuts through the screen.
He has his rifle. He readies the rifle and sticks the barrel through the hole in the screen. Bam! One time. Bam! 2 times. 12 times he pulls the trigger. You talk about a coward. Stony is asleep, and he shoots him in the darkness of the night on the outside, shooting inside the house.
This is someone that sees himself as a vigilante, as an anti-hero. I'm doing a service to the community. I'm standing up, for what's right, where other people just let it go.
$3,000 was thought to have been inside the trailer and was not there when Stony McGaraga's body was eventually found. 2 years would pass between his murder and Inman's confession, which he offered in detail to justify his actions.
Willie would go on to explain it's all about the child molestation. He's getting rid of a cancer. He's a tumor on society. But was he? Or was the real motive why Willie had to go inside the house? Because he knew there was money inside of the house. And so he had to go inside the house, and he wanted to make sure that Stony was dead. So he kills Stony and searches for the money.
The other outstanding case on the police files in the St. John's, Springerville, Apache County area was the death of Vietnam War veteran Daniel Acton, known locally as Hummerdan, because he constantly hummed music. Another Inman victim, and for spurious and untrue allegations.
He's cleaning up the town, so he shot him. He didn't like Daniel because he was humming Dan. Got tired of the humming. What is all this silliness and nonsense of all this humming? So he shot him. He continues to talk about humming Dan being a drug user, humming Dan being irritating to the people in town.
There was something else Inman didn't like about Hummer Dan.
Inman believes that Dan actually kills his dog. And you got to remember, for Inman, this dog is the most kind of consistent friend he's ever had. He was in his life more regularly and consistently than even his parents were. So this would have been hugely traumatic for him. So the idea that I'm going to go out and I'm going to kill someone that killed my best friend, well, that's just retribution, right? That's just tit for tat. And that's exactly how he describes it.
So he shot Dan. Then he takes Dan's body and he buries Daniel. No different than a dog would bury a bone in a shallow grave in a field.
Inman almost seemed proud as he took detectives on the tour of his killing grounds.
He took us to the ranch where he had killed Ricky. He took us to the place where Daniel Ekman had been killed. And then he took us to where Stony had been killed and how he killed Stony.
And that was the end of the story that Willie Inman told police. He was a killer who felt he had a right to kill. He had stopped not because he was struck by remorse, but because he got caught. His challenge had been to commit the crimes.
What matters here is the mission, is the accomplishment of the mission. It's not about the victims as individuals, and it's not about the perpetrator. So in that context, it's easy to see that it's the numbers that counted. The more victims, the more significant the mission that has been achieved. So yes, these offences would have carried on.
Those around the tiny community, shocked by the deaths, were not surprised at the identity of the killer.
They were not surprised. They were more like, that doesn't surprise me, or more like, well, I can see him doing it. Just an odd kid. Yeah, I can see him doing something like that, but just surprised at how many he had done. Especially to a friend too, that he considered a friend, and just the day before, or that when he went missing told the mom, "Hey mom." Just heartless. Sign of a guy has no heart, no remorse, no soul, I guess.
He did this with malice. He knew where he was going, he knew what he was doing, he knew how he was going to do it. He planned it, staged it, and completed it. So if that isn't vigilantism, nothing is. And he's doing it for a cause that he thinks is right, whether it was barking dogs, whether it was because they're a dope slinger, or whether they were a child molester, or whatever. He always had this reason in the back of his mind for doing that. But reality is, the only time that I saw Mr. Inman remorseful was just on the first initial confession.
I felt so bad. I'm crying right now. I told him the only thing that makes me cry is taps. And I told him, I realized something, that I felt so bad at the end when I had buried him, that not only did I pick a good spot, that I hope somebody had buried me in someplace nice. I gave him a 21 gun salute. I did.
Did you?
Yes.
He was not remorseful at all on any of the rest of the interviews that we did with him.
What truly was going on inside the mind of the serial killer Willie Inman? Some believe he's an example of pure evil.
I think that I've always wrestled with the fact that if we're born this way, or we're made a certain way, or it's life circumstances. To a point, I think we're born a certain way. And I think Willie was born that way.
Others believe that he had a warped sense of right and wrong, justifiable and unjustifiable.
But I think there's no doubt that actually Inman saw himself as a vigilante, as someone who was there to right wrongs.
For the brother of one of the victims, Inman lived in a big world which was actually very small, and even then he could not find a place within it to be accepted. Killing was his way of making a mark.
He just wanted to show that he had some sort of power. You know, he wasn't worthless. You know, he could make these kind of bad things happen. You know, he thought that he would be remembered as, you know, a mastermind of some sort.
She was the caring nurse who could raise a smile all the while hiding that she was a killer. Her outward appearance, nothing but a front.
Elizabeth Wetlaufer's secret is that she is essentially empty. For her, life is meaningless.
As she killed 8 times, nobody suspected Nurse Elizabeth May Wetlaufer.
While on the outside to her fellow co-workers, she's this jovial woman who laughs and giggles and lights up a room.
Taking courage from her macabre interpretation of the Bible, she would pray for guidance, then head to the bedside of her patients. For some, a visit from the nurse offered no salvation.
I honestly believed at the time that God wanted to do it.
It's horrific to think that she could have gone to her grave with all this. No one would have batted an eyelid.
It's funny, but it's not funny.
Nothing and nobody actually means anything to her.
What went on inside the mind of the serial killer, Elizabeth Wetlaufer? Elizabeth Tracy May Wetlaufer, 45. Someone who appeared to be a genial and capable professional, certainly someone who could be trusted.
In the late 1990s, Elizabeth has gone to college. She has her RN. One of her jobs, she's assigned to the night shift. She is the nurse in charge of administering all the medication.
She worked in a job as a carer in care homes that she may have been seen as, looked down upon. She worked with people that could be difficult at times, that were suffering with things like dementia.
This is a nurse. She's in a position of trust. No different than a police officer, somebody that's in the clergy, a doctor. Of all the people you need to trust, it's that nurse. She's the one you're going to turn to for that ultimate bedside manner, that bedside care.
But Nurse Beth, as she preferred to be known, wrestled with a condition that she kept hidden from her patients, one which was affecting her mind. She was convinced that God had sent her on a mission to kill some of those for whom she cared.
I just had a sense after my marriage broke up that God was going to use me for something.
She said that God told her to do things, but it seems to me that there was a sense that she felt all-powerful in those moments.
Moments, plural, as she struggles to make herself comfortable on a September day in a police interview room in Toronto. Beth claimed to have sent at least 8 elderly people the way of the Lord. Her story was hard to believe. Homicide hunter Brian Harris has spent a career learning to recognize those who make a habit of murder. Elizabeth Wetlaufer was not somebody that he would have suspected.
Your FBI profilers would describe a serial killer as being a middle-aged, white male, some formal education past high school, educated parents. This was not the case with Elizabeth.
Old people that she tended to were of an age and in a place where often people die, hospitals and care homes.
You look at these victims, they were all elderly. Nobody would suspect any kind of foul play.
As she killed, she was literally beyond suspicion.
She's sharp enough to know that if this person that I can give life to or snuff out life to, nobody will question what has happened to them, because there's a reason they're in the hospital. People assume that it was just a natural life cycle, that they're gonna die.
She would be killing still today, but for the voices in her head which made her finally doubt that she was in fact carrying out God's work.
And then after a while I started to really wonder, after some of the murders, if it was God or if it was the devil fooling me.
And when you read her account and listen to her account of what happened, it feels like in those moments she was playing God.
How had it come to this for Elizabeth Wetlaufer? At one point in her life, she seemed settled. enjoyed inviting guests to visit her at her home where she lived with her then husband. So what had happened and what was going on inside her mind as she appeared in front of Canadian police voluntarily on September 29th, 2016? They had no idea who they were dealing with, a homicidal maniac or a fantasist. At first, Detective Constable Nathan Hergott's relaxed demeanor appeared to suggest that he thought someone who could be a fantasist.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
There's too many people moving and shaking around here. You can't really keep track of who's doing what. So yeah, like I said, I'm just gonna go through for everything in this room is audio and video recorded first off. You okay with that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I just want to go through, like I said, a couple formalities, cover a few little things off, things that I have to do on my end that I need to do, and things that I just want to tell you and make sure that we're all on the same page before we get going.
Okay.
Okay? So.
The detective was about to hear a story which stretched credibility. The lady opposite him had not been under suspicion of a crime of any sort, but on her arrival at the station, she had proffered a handwritten confession detailing how she had killed 8 times and attempted to kill a further 3 times. Was her story true? If it was, Detective Hergott had just her word for it. There had been no complaints, there was no evidence, but the handwritten confession and Wetlaufer herself.
Okay, you're not under arrest. The door is unlocked. Okay, I'm not impeding your way to the door. If you want to leave at any time, if you want to stop talking to me at any time, you just let me know.
Who is Elizabeth Wetlaufer? Psychologist Linda Papadopoulos has been tracing her timeline.
So we know that Elizabeth grew up kind of a normal upbringing, although it was said to be quite religious, quite strict and religious. And I think there's something about growing up like that that perhaps makes you feel very confined by societal rules and norms.
It was normal to get married, so that's what Elizabeth did.
In 1997, Elizabeth got married. She was following her life path. This was a woman who was raised with a mother and a father in a household that they were devout Christians. She grew up in the church. Getting married was just another part of the typical life cycle.
You're born and raised Woodstock?
Yeah, born and raised in Woodstock, married from 97 to 2007.
Her marriage, though, didn't work out. She was confused about something. Her devout Christian ways did not allow her easily to accept something she was slowly realizing.
You see, there was something else going on with Elizabeth. She was battling of who she was on the inside. Elizabeth was a lesbian.
I think religion has a very complicated relationship with sexuality. There's a lot of guilt entwined with a lot of religions and sex in general, let alone having a sexuality that isn't that of the majority. And I think because of that, there's going to be a sense of feeling different and through that perhaps feeling pathological or even guilty that she may have felt.
There was just a complete discord between her religious upbringing and her sexuality. The two couldn't be reconciled. Equally, I think there was a complete inconsistency, discord between the discipline, the harsh discipline that was her background, partly again related to the religiosity, and her basic character, which I think was a bit weak, a bit self-indulgent. Those two, again, couldn't be reconciled.
We know that she was someone quite lonely. We know that she was someone that felt that she wasn't even entitled to her sexuality. So even though she was a lesbian, she got married, she had an unhappy marriage that ended. Because of her religion, she felt guilt about her attraction to other women.
But I did a lot of praying about it, and I just did a lot of praying, reading my Bible, getting very involved in my faith, getting very involved in my church.
Right.
She couldn't out herself. She couldn't follow through on her own desires that she had. She had to be denied those close personal relationships to have a true relationship because she was afraid what it would look like.
The failed marriage was what Beth would blame for what happened next. she was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Her life goes in the wrong direction. At home, the signs of her decline were there for all to see. Often alone, binge eating, binge drinking, binge drug taking.
That's where things get a little crazy.
Okay.
This is part that I haven't told the doctors. Because it seems so stupid now. When my ex and I broke up in 2007, I was already taking the medication for my borderline personality disorder.
It may very well have been that she felt that her life was spiraling, that she was losing control of what was going on, especially if she wanted to keep this facade up of having this marriage because it allowed her to portray an ideal she felt that she had to portray. And it may be that because of that, she needed to assert some sense of power and control in a different way. And she does this quite horrifically by killing.
Eventually, her true sexuality takes its course.
And I met a woman online, and she decided to move to be with me.
Okay.
She was afraid that perhaps she'd be damned to hell because of her sexual orientation. She was afraid she was going against everything that she was raised to be.
Her relationship with her new female partner doesn't last long either. Elizabeth's was a troubled sex and relationship story.
Elizabeth felt that she couldn't be open about her sexuality, she couldn't own her sexuality, and as a consequence, she felt she had to repress it. Obviously, no one in a million years would suggest that anyone who feels that they can't express their sexuality will go on to hurt anybody. But what we are suggesting here is that if you feel that, then the way that you understand yourself, your identity, and your place in society is absolutely going to be compromised. It's going to be difficult. You're not allowed to be who you are. If this is what she felt, then it's not surprising that she had a hard time with relationships.
As she cared for the elderly on wards, mostly on the night shift, Elizabeth's inner turmoil was hidden by how drugs and drink allow her to appear as if together, stable, dependable.
She turns to alcohol. She turns to drugs. While on the outside, to her fellow co-workers, she's this jovial woman who laughs and giggles and lights up a room. They describe her as maybe being someone that brought joy to the workplace, where on inside she's miserable. There's a dark shadow just eating away at her.
And who should she take out her rage upon? Her patients. She felt justified too, because it was God she was listening to, and his message was clear.
And I was so angry. And it was like a voice said inside me, I'll use you, don't worry about it. I believe it was the influence of that voice or whatever it was. It wasn't a voice in my head, it was a voice in here. And when I would do it, afterwards I would hear like a laughter in my chest.
The first to feel her wrath, Clotilda Adriano. Spending her final years in a care home, Carescent in Woodstock near Toronto, she was doing fine. She had her sister Albina in the same home. One evening, Elizabeth felt what she described as a surge. She inserted insulin into a syringe, insulin that Clotilda did not need.
Okay, Clotilda Adriano. She was the first person I ever gave extra insulin to.
Okay.
I think I gave her 40, and again, there was that searching, but it wasn't so much that I wanted her to die, it was more let's see what happens. And I did that to her on more than one occasion.
She now waited to see what happened. The mixed-up Beth Wetlaufer left the survival of Clotilda Adriano to fate and to God's will, and to the effects of insulin on the body of an old woman who didn't need it. Clotilda Adriano, 87 years old, was made of tough stuff. She survived the attack on her by Beth Wetlaufer.
and I didn't really want her to die. I don't know, I was just angry and had this sense inside me that she might be a person that God wanted back with him.
And is that feeling you're referring to that you had in your stomach
Yes.
at times?
Yes.
Elizabeth's gut feeling, what she described as laughter in her tummy, may have been about her instinct, but her choice of insulin to attack Clotilda was perfect science.
The weapon of choice for Elizabeth was insulin. What's significant about that, as a nurse, she knows that insulin gets absorbed in the body. While it can kill, depending on the dosage, it will also dissipate. It is very, very hard to detect, and Elizabeth knows that.
Insulin disappears from the bloodstream, so the serial killer in the making was free to try to kill again. And she didn't have far to travel for her next target, Clotilda's sister, Albina.
Then eastern first door on the left was your sister Albina. She was diabetic.
Okay.
She was October 2007.
Sorry, that was her sister?
Clotilda and Albina were sisters, yes.
Oh, okay.
The detective seems incredulous. Wetlaufer was admitting using two sisters as guinea pigs. How much insulin would it take to kill an elderly person?
Clotilda was 90 or so.
And her sister?
Albina was probably 82.
And did they have family that would come and visit?
Yes, yes,
All right.
very much so.
Who would that be that would come to visit?
Clotilda, I think it was her daughters, and Albina was her husband.
Like her sister, Albina survived the attack by Wetlaufer, but Elizabeth would have plenty more opportunities. She would go home, hide behind closed curtains, look forward to buying her latest batch of scratch cards. And then she would head back to the bedsides of vulnerable patients. Powerless at home, powerful on the ward.
Elizabeth is the one that has to show care for them. Elizabeth is going to be the one to relieve them of their pain. Elizabeth is the one that is going to be in charge of giving them their medicine that will hopefully heal them, or at least aid in their healing process. She has a lot of power working this night shift.
And all the time, psychologically tortured. Linda Papadopoulos enlisted forensic psychologist Donna Youngs to help investigate the mind of Elizabeth Wetlaufer.
There are people who are quite simply not what they seem, and Elizabeth is very definitely one of those. She presents this exterior, this external presentation is of somebody who is so caring, so empathetic. The stark contrast between her inner psychology and her external presentation is really striking.
As a nurse, Beth Wetlaufer appeared proficient and professional, but at home she would nightly return to a crumpled world with too much food, drink, and too many pills. Alone with her misery and listening to what she thought was the word of God. No partner, children though she wanted them, desperately seeking a sense of purpose, unfulfilled as a nurse.
She knows how to play the roles, and that's what she's doing here, but really, Elizabeth Wetlaufer's secret is that she is essentially empty. For her, life is meaningless.
She had failed to kill twice. James Silcox, an 84-year-old veteran of World War II, was next on her target list. She upped the amount of insulin in a syringe. When confessing, she remembered every detail of events of a late August day in 2007.
I have written it, I have read it, I have, lived it, so.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Mr. Silcox.
Yes.
Okay, September of 2007.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first one that died as a result of what I did.
Okay.
The first one to have died as a result of what she did, James Silcox. Wetlaufer suggested she had legitimate cause to kill.
And tell me about your knowledge of James and your daily interactions during a shift with him.
I didn't see him every time. He wasn't always my patient. I just knew from what people had said that he would grab the nurse's breasts and buttocks, and he would say horribly inappropriate things about his wife.
James, who had dementia, did not survive the shot of insulin. He had recently had major surgery, and it was thought that he had died as a result of complications from that surgery. In fact, he had become Elizabeth Wetlaufer's first victim.
One afternoon I was working with him and he did grab me. And again, I got that feeling inside that this is his time to go.
Wetlaufer did occasionally let the mask slip.
One time she was found in the stairwell, passed out, a heavy alcohol smell. Others talked about how they thought they smelled alcohol on her, but no one ever reported her. It was the wall of silence.
Just before Christmas 2007, Elizabeth took a dislike to an 84-year-old patient called Morris Granat.
He was another one who liked to grab breasts and asses.
She was not about to allow that to go unpunished.
Where she couldn't control what was going on in her personal life of who she was, she darn sure could control what was going on the night shift or any other shift that she was assigned to work.
One afternoon I was working with him and he did grab me. And again, I got that feeling inside that this is his time to go. So I gave him an overdose of insulin after supper. And I believe he died the next day.
Morris Granat marked her second homicide. Another day, another death of an old person in a care home. Nothing suspicious.
People aren't questioning, they're not questioning Elizabeth. People die in hospitals, especially elderly patients.
Wetlaufer carried on with life as usual, in public and online, filling in her business resume on social media sites, describing herself on forums as someone who is assessing patients, administering medications, performing prescribed treatments, communicating with patients' families and healthcare professionals, supervising care staff. The perfect nurse. She was also starting a new hobby. Using a pen name, she began to publish poetry online.
Elizabeth has this fascination of writing. She writes poetry. It's a far cry from roses are red, violets are blue. The poetry that she writes is dark. It's death. It's about power. It's about having control.
And it's interesting when you go back, and of course when you go back you see things that maybe you wouldn't see the first time, but there certainly are references that are very dark in there, references to murder.
Heart beats, then sprays as this next victim pays her deft dagger's bill. That's what she wrote, then closed down her computer and headed to the care home to kill again. Who would be her next victim?
Elizabeth's poetry gives us an insight to what was happening on the inside of her. Elizabeth had the power of God. She could snuff out life when and how she wanted. She could watch that person and watch their last breath of life go away. Or she could give them the proper meds to keep them alive. And to Elizabeth, that gave her control, that gave her power.
With 2 dead, 2 more narrowly surviving, the little overweight lady just kept telling an astonished detective of more and more attempts to kill. Wayne Hedges had lived in Caress since the year 2000. He was regularly given insulin as part of his treatment. He was also diagnosed schizophrenic and not one of Wetlaufer's favorite patients.
Then there was Wayne. He was on the nurse wing. He had dementia. He was diabetic. He could be uncooperative. And I gave him a large overdose. Because I thought it was his turn to go.
His turn to go. Wayne Hedges did not have dementia. At 56, he was the latest to be attacked by Beth Wetlaufer. He survived, but she was far from finished with her killing. 56-year-old Michael Priddle, a sufferer from Huntington's disease, survived a Wetlaufer insulin attack too. Occasionally, the dosage she applied was not enough to cause death. Throughout 2007 and 2008, Wetlaufer's personal life continued to be in a mess. None of those that she met had formed a lasting relationship, the kind that Elizabeth May had always wanted. She'd meet people via dating websites, but no one would stick around. One complained she came onto her far too quickly.
The fluctuation is a classic symptom of somebody with an emptiness within them, as is the abuse of drugs and alcohol. Somebody looking for meaning, looking for solace, looking for a way not to feel the emptiness that they feel.
Over the next 2 years, Wetlaufer tried a variety of ways of comforting herself, of coping with her feelings of emptiness.
The alcohol and the drug abuse are classic ways of seeking meaning, of trying to relieve oneself from the pain of the emptiness that she feels, of trying to find something where she feels nothing, where she finds no meaning.
She continued exposing her soul in her poetry.
She wrote under a pseudonym and was quite prolific, published a lot of poems.
Using prescription drugs.
Any inhibitions that most people have about medications, about drugs, are much reduced with her.
Her drinking becomes legendary.
And she eases that pain with the use of drugs and alcohol, and it gets worse and worse and worse.
And of course, she could always turn to God.
I had a pastor that I told me, he prayed over me and told me I'd be fine. And that was God's grace.
By 2011, still working at the Crescent nursing home near Toronto, the drink, drugs, writing and praying had not stopped Elizabeth Wetlaufer wanting to kill. As ever, she had easy victims from whom to choose.
Her life is spiraling, and it's the perfect storm. She has a vulnerable population that she is solely responsible, and she has a literal murder weapon that no one can trace because these people need the insulin.
Over 3 months, Mary Zuravinsky, Gladys Millard, and Helen Matheson all fell victim to nurse Beth Wetlaufer. Mary, according to Wetlaufer, was almost asking for it.
One night she said, I'm going to die tonight.
Mary said that?
Yeah. And I said, oh. And she said, yeah, why don't you get me into the deathbed so I can die? And I said, are you sure? And she said, yeah, put me to bed, I'm going to die. So I said, okay, and I went to the other nurse that was working with me. And she said, oh, okay, well, let's put her inside this care room if that's what you want. So we did, and then I thought, well, she must be the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Gladys Millard was next. She had Alzheimer's and was somebody Elizabeth Wetlaufer actually liked. But she would soon find herself injected with insulin.
Yeah, she was very spunky, but she went downhill fast.
Did she?
Eventually, she had dementia, didn't take her pills well, didn't eat well, very stubborn woman. And as always, one evening I just got that red surging feeling that she was going to be the one. And gave her insulin overdose.
And then came the murder of Helen Matheson. Elizabeth gave her a piece of pie and ice cream, and then a few hours later, injected her with insulin.
You don't say a lot of negative things about Helen here. Did you get along with her okay? Did she ever do anything to harm you or?
No, she was very quiet. It was just, I got that feeling that she's next to her time, so.
It was November 2011. The death count was rising, and so were concerns about Elizabeth.
By 2011, 5 people had died under Elizabeth's watch. Now, during this time as well, her co-workers, they've seen some changes in her. They've smelled alcohol. They've noticed some bizarre behavior, but they're not connecting it with the deaths of the patients. It's just that, wow, 5 people have died. And Elizabeth's behavior and actions, they don't report anything. She should have at least been removed or sent for treatment for her alcohol or her drug problem.
A Scottish woman called Helen Young had settled in Canada after the Second World War. Wetlaufer did not take kindly to her. Miserable and unhappy with her life was how she described her. Hers was another name featured in Wetlaufer's handwritten confession in the interview with the police too.
Helen was miserable. She frequently yelled out, help me nurse. She frequently yelled out she wanted to die. She just was not happy with her life. She would wheel around in her wheelchair saying, help me nurse, help me nurse, help me nurse, help me nurse. And when you went to help her, what do you want help with? Nothing. Get away with me. Go away. Help me nurse, help me nurse. didn't want to eat, didn't want to drink. Very difficult to deal with.
During this stage of her life, Donna Youngs believes that Elizabeth Wetlaufer felt that she had no role in life, no partner, not a mother, confused about her sexuality. People like that feel they are literally nobody.
In the confusion, they just give up. And without any proper identity of their own, then they never develop any feelings about it. Nothing or nobody becomes significant to them, because you need an initial identity of your own before anything else can matter to you.
Wetlaufer's victims, in her eyes, simply did not matter.
And instead, she almost blames the victims, saying, well, they were very difficult. They were very naggy. They were a very difficult person to deal with.
I honestly believed at the time that God wanted me to do it.
It was the same throughout the interview. Elizabeth's motivation wasn't, according to her, to kill. It was God's will. She was merely the instrument. In reality, she had the choice of whether people lived or died.
And when you have the freedom to choose, you have godlike powers. So you see, Elizabeth had the freedom to choose. She had the freedom to choose between good and evil. And time and time and time again, Elizabeth chose evil. Why? She enjoyed it. You see, if sinning was so horrible, if it didn't feel good, people wouldn't do it.
Wetlaufer killed 2 more times at Crescent Care Home. Maureen Pickering was target number 11. Again, not somebody that Beth liked.
Maureen was a handful. She would attack other patients. She would pull their hair. She would hit them. She would pinch them.
Not diabetic, should never have been given insulin, but Wetlaufer gave her a massive dosage.
So, yeah, I overdosed her.
I think she certainly felt a great sense of power over the people around her, and I'm guessing that she felt very powerless in other parts of her life.
Elizabeth's days at Crescent Care were numbered. Ironically, she fell foul of management because she was spotted giving an incorrect dosage to a patient. She received a firm rebuke in writing from her boss. You had administered the wrong medication to a patient, it read. The resident experienced distress. Beth, although you acknowledged this latest error, this is another incident in a pattern of behaviors. The termination of your employment is warranted.
I was fired from Crescent Care for medication errors that had nothing to do with this.
By 2014, 2 more people have died. One in 2013, one in 2014. And so now the facility itself, they're very much aware of Elizabeth. And they decide to remove the problem. They, in essence, fire her. But they don't make any notes, they don't tell anyone, they just fire her.
But there is a shortage of care workers who are qualified nurses, so Beth Wetlaufer soon got a new job.
Then from there I went to Meadow Park Nursing Home.
Okay.
And at the Meadow Park Nursing Home, she started killing all over again. Arpad Horforth was next on the Wetlaufer hit list.
He was mean. He would grab the nurses and these PSWs, whenever they were trying to do things for him, he would grab them, he would twist their arms, he would punch them. Very difficult to do care for. And one night I just got that surgery, I got that you need to go.
Once the decision was taken, little would stop Elizabeth.
He fought the first needle, and then the second needle I got in.
In her mind, it was God or the devil. So, the devil made her really angry and she killed these nasty men.
Wetlaufer was not long at her new job. She moved on to another and continued attacking patients. 2 more were injected with insulin unnecessarily, but they survived, and Elizabeth remained unsuspected.
As a homicide detective, even with 8 people that have died under the watch of Elizabeth, they're all elderly, some over 90 years old. As a detective, I might look at Elizabeth as incompetent, as a nurse who never should practice in the field of medicine ever, but criminally, I don't know if I would be looking at her as a murderer. I'd be looking at her as incompetent.
Which may well have been why it took Elizabeth Wetlaufer herself to reveal her crimes. Given that, according to her, God had played such a big part in her serial killer behavior, it may not be surprising that Wetlaufer's next step was to consult a pastor in her local church.
I had a pastor that I told, and he prayed over me and told me I'd be fine. And that was God's grace. And then...
When was that?
That was Halloween 2013. Yeah.
And you kind of divulged to what had happened to you to that point in your life with involving these people?
Yeah.
And so she thinks she can confess, and then she can be in some way redeemed, I think.
Perhaps the pastor did not believe what he was hearing. Police were not told. Then Wetlaufer had a meeting with friends when she tells them what she's been doing.
I told them that I had been killing people using an insulin overdose. And they all said, yes, you better go get help. So off I went.
Okay.
In 2016, Elizabeth checks in to get mental help, to get treatment for her drug and alcohol addictions. It doesn't take long for her to reveal her secret that she's been carrying around with her, that she is responsible for the killing of innocent life. Now, can you imagine the psychologist that is hearing this? Now, ethically, he can't go to the police. He's bound ethically that this is his patient.
She opens up to a psychiatrist and tells him that she's made all these horrible decisions, killed all these people, and he urges her to tell the police right away.
As part of her counselling, her psychiatrist also tells Wetlaufer to write down what she'd been doing. She dutifully obeys, and after a few days, followed the advice of her therapist on another matter. Turn yourself in.
The doctor suggested to me that I should. Not to give to the police, but he said that if I wrote it out, it would be a good part of my therapy. So, and did take a large amount of pressure off me and helped me to really clarify the fact that no, it wasn't God, it was something wrong with me psychologically that was making me believe that it was God.
At first she doesn't go, but eventually she does. She turns herself into the police and starts telling a story. And a story, and a story, and a story. She tells them about each body, each person. She describes how she snuffed the life out of them, watching them die. What was most profound is during her storytelling, she cackles.
Okay.
Funny, but it's not funny.
She giggles. She laughs.
Oh, perfect. Sure.
Which one has the vodka in it?
While all people are capable of taking human life, only a few actually have. And out of those few that have, very few enjoy it. And those that enjoy it are today's serial killers. Elizabeth enjoyed it. You can hear it in her cackle. You can hear it in her laugh. It's the only thing she could control. She enjoyed taking that life.
Why had she confessed? According to criminal profiler Donna Youngs, not to help the relatives of those she had murdered. It was more for her own sake.
She doesn't like having the responsibility of being the only person that knows what's happened. That's not something that somebody like her would enjoy carrying. She wants to share it for that reason. It's a selfish motivation behind the confessions, and it's an emotional unburdening. She will have had some kind of almost childlike response to having committed murders, and she won't enjoy that feeling. So in her mind, she will, by confessing, she gets rid of the burden, she gets rid of the emotional uncomfortableness that she's feeling.
As the interview reached its conclusion, Elizabeth May Wetlaufer was keen to get home, something she was allowed to do before being put before the courts. She had been candid and checks confirmed that she had killed or tried to kill nobody for months.
You've done some things to some innocent people.
Absolutely.
Some pretty, what people are
Horrible
gonna,
things.
people are gonna have opinions of you, and people are gonna, right.
The interview room confession seemed to be Wetlaufer's way of cleaning the slate now that she had a clear mind, because before she claimed that she hadn't. That is why she misread the signals from God.
And now I know that it wasn't God, and I'm ashamed of myself that happened, but I also think that it was mental health. You know, I think it was, I wasn't in my right mind, or I would have been able to tell. I mean, I was raised to believe in God. I was raised from a baby to go to Sunday school, so how could I get such a strong feeling that this is what God wanted, unless it was something wrong with my head?
Wetlaufer was charged with 8 counts of murder, 4 of attempted murder, and 2 of aggravated assault. She did not contest the charges, having confessed, and on June 26, 2017, Wetlaufer was sentenced to 8 concurrent life sentences with no possibility of parole for 25 years. But for the confession, it's highly unlikely the crimes would have come to light.
And in the end, all those times Elizabeth was trying to take control and have that control with her victims, she had the ultimate control when she finally decided to confess. She could have remained silent.
And it's horrific to think that she could have gone to her grave with all this.
There is not a doubt in my mind that without Elizabeth's confession, without her coming forward and talking to those detectives, these cases would never be solved.
No one would have batted an eyelid. This was, you know, these were the most vulnerable people, or some of the most vulnerable people in our society. We expect them to die. We expect her to be doing her job. No one was watching. She literally could have gotten away with murder again and again and again.
Theodore Johnson killed his first wife, but in a strange series of events, he would soon be released.
To me, it was murder as opposed to he was convicted of manslaughter.
He was set free after just 2 years on the grounds that he had been the abused rather than the abuser.
Having served his sentence, he leaves prison. He meets a new woman, Ivonne Bennett,
who he also kills, claiming this time that his mind was disturbed by the fact that she was cheating on him.
Theodore Johnson proves to us all that the crime of passion argument no longer really holds any water.
In what's thought to be a unique case, the 2-time killer was released to kill again.
This particular leopard doesn't change his spot.
What went on inside the mind of the serial killer, Theodore Johnson? In 2016, Theodore Johnson ran headlong into the path of a train. He survived his latest suicide attempt, but he was badly injured. Earlier in the day, he had killed a woman called Angie Best, a mother of 4, a grandmother too. She had made, quite literally, a fatal mistake.
She wanted to stop the relationship, he didn't, and the poor lady paid with her life.
To be in a relationship with Johnson was to risk being killed. Angie Best was the third female partner who had lost her life at his hands.
Any sense of stepping out of line and disrespecting him by finding another partner, by standing up for themselves, would have been met with this huge, disproportionate anger and violence.
Who was this man who could simply not take rejection without killing? Theodore Johnson spent most of his life in England living in high-rise flats in the Midlands or in London. He had swapped the culture and lifestyle of Jamaica, where he'd grown up. What else do we know about the man who would create unwanted English legal history?
Theodore Johnson is born in Jamaica, one of 11 kids, poor family, and eventually he moves over to Wolverhampton, where he starts his new life with his young wife, Ivonne.
Certainly in the beginning, it looked as if Theodore Johnson wanted to have the normal and traditional life. He wanted children, he wanted a wife, he wanted an ordinary relationship.
And they lived in a flat on the 9th floor of a block, and he had a job in a local garage, and, you know, they had their family life. Things were going well for them.
It was 1981, but soon it was clear it wasn't all plain sailing.
The relationship with his first wife started to break down at some point.
To some, Theodore cut a distinctive figure because of his height.
Well, he's not a big man. He's quite slight, really. Demure, subdued.
Weighs just over around 110 pounds. So in terms of his physical stature, he isn't somebody that's particularly imposing, and perhaps feels a bit vulnerable because of that.
If he felt vulnerable, small, it did not restrict him from being violent towards Ivonne. There were reports from neighbours of her being beaten. It was a different era. The police seldom intervened.
I could personally attest that. I was a police officer in the 1980s myself, and when we used to go to calls of domestic violence and domestic disturbances, there wasn't the kind of support for victims that we have now. It was a kind of, well, this is a private matter, everybody should leave it alone.
It was a Sunday, and Ivonne wanted Theodore to dress for church.
It may have been about him feeling very belittled, about his wife saying that he wasn't smart enough to understand things to attend church. We also know that the type of argument they're having escalates.
He'd attacked her with various items, including an ashtray.
Then with a vase, then with a broom.
And then the argument supposedly went out onto the balcony, and prosecution and the police would say he pushed her off. He would say it was an accidental push and she fell over.
Ivonne Johnson was just 31. Ivonne and Theodore had 2 small children. Their mother was about to be depicted as a nagging wife who'd made their father's life a misery.
In fact, he holds that up as a defense. He says to the judge that, you know what, she would make me do housework. And the judge actually refers to this when sentencing. So instead of being seen as the perpetrator, instead of Ivonne Johnson being seen as a victim, it switched around. And all of a sudden, Ivonne Johnson is this horrible, abusive spouse.
She was the violent aggressor, not him. A judge and jury was asked to believe that no man should have to put up with a woman like Ivonne.
She forces me to do housework and washing up and cooking.
He explained his motivation for killing her as a kind of spontaneous self-defense. So he came at this by saying that she was the abuser and not him.
He even uses the ferocity of his attack to support his defense.
Because he used multiple weapons and it was frenzied violence, and you know he tipped her over a balcony, which is a very visible thing to do. You're not going to be able to hide that you've done that. So it can appear to the rest of us that that was potentially spontaneous rage. Somebody got very angry, lost their rationality, and look what happened. I could not have predicted this was going to happen.
Therefore, he wasn't guilty of murder, he was guilty of manslaughter by reason of diminished responsibility. And that's what the court found.
It's an important distinction in English law. If a defendant can establish that his responsibility for his actions were diminished in any way, that he had been provoked, or that he'd been abused, then the charge can be reduced to manslaughter. The sentence can be reduced from life, too.
He's so good at reframing the story, about putting himself in the position of victim, that not only does the judge buy into it, but the sentence is reduced and it goes down to only 3 years.
And in fact, Theodore Johnson was released even earlier.
He was sentenced to be detained in a secure psychiatric unit.
He was designated mentally ill. If he could be treated, he would no longer be dangerous. That was what he argued. Former Detective David Nichol doesn't believe that Johnson had mental issues, but the authorities at the time did.
So for him to claim provocation and, oh, I'm a poor wee victim here, no.
And after 2 years, he was found to be cured, or at least sane enough to be released back into the community. And this happened, and of course there he was, Theodore Johnson, the killer, back in the community and able to form new relationships.
By today's standards, his treatment seems bizarre. A wife killer treated leniently because he was so put upon, and free after just 24 months. It was a sign of things to come for the way that Theodore could manipulate his way out of trouble.
This is kind of a real glimpse into Theodore's state of mind, right? And we see that he's very good at rewriting the story. He's very good at manipulating facts so that they work for him. You know, don't forget, this person was caught red-handed. You know, this wasn't just someone that flipped and shot a gun. He beat this woman with 3 different household objects. Then he found the strength to tip this woman over a 9th floor balcony. So, you know, this idea that he's this tiny, fragile little man is seems far-fetched now, but clearly he manages to pull the wool over everyone's eyes and say, no, it was her fault. I was the victim. Obviously, this is what happened.
Back out, the man who had killed one woman soon went looking for another. The decision to send Johnson to a high-security psychiatric unit meant the probable use of medication. But he had been seen as the victim. He would not have been counselled about being a perpetrator of domestic abuse.
So he would have come out exactly the same person, maybe a worse person, than when he went in. And given the kind of person that Theodore Johnson was, he probably would have been searching for another stable relationship almost immediately.
He had wanted to be in a settled partnership when he left Jamaica, when he first arrived in England, and now that he was in London too.
He liked that stability in his life. He even felt entitled to it. So he would have found somebody quite quickly, and he would have speeded up those romantic processes straight away so that they would feel that they were perhaps in the middle of a grand passion. If they were in love, he was the perfect man.
So having served his sentence, he leaves prison. He meets a new woman, Ivonne Bennett.
Theodore is in a new relationship with a new Ivonne, and they move to a new city, and together they have a new baby.
He pushes the relationship along as quickly as he can.
But of course, the reason for speeding it up is to get that control as soon as possible, because he needs that. He needs to have that stability. He needs to have somebody else in his life who he can control and who will focus just on him. It's very important to him.
And you might think that, this is his chance to start again. But as is sadly so often the case, he doesn't change his way of dealing with the woman in his relationship. He doesn't change the way he treats her, and that relationship too becomes abusive.
He and Ivonne stay together for another 7 years. Is that a sign that things were going smoothly? Not according to criminologist Jane Monckton Smith.
If nothing comes along to disrupt the relationship, if they are maintaining control, if the victim is allowing that control to continue because probably they're too scared to do otherwise, that relationship could float along for 50 years. The trigger, the provocation, which is usually separation or rejection, could come at any point. So the fact that they were together 7 years shows more about his need for that stable relationship than hers.
Neighbours later described a relationship dominated by two things: regular shouting matches and Theodore Johnson wanting to keep a close eye on his wife, to know where she was morning, noon and night.
People who are controlling, like Theodore Johnson, who are very, very controlling, their partners probably don't have time to breathe on their own without him having given permission or not.
So we know that this is probably a tumultuous, a difficult relationship, because at least on one occasion, the police are called in because of a domestic dispute. So the violence is there, but then things go quiet.
But inside the flat where they lived, there was turmoil. Johnson accused Ivonne of seeing someone else. True or not, he was not one to live with doubt.
This particular leopard doesn't change his spots, and he carries on being abusive within that relationship. So much so that Ivonne calls police and says, he's been abusing me.
I think their relationship was breaking up and she wanted him out, but it's not the sort of thing we can get too involved in.
You know, this is in an age where the police way of dealing with domestic violence wasn't as refined as it is today.
Johnson suspected an affair. A constant in his life was the willingness to self-harm or threaten suicide. Johnson would make serious attempts to kill himself on several occasions. Ironically, making threats to hurt himself was a way of protecting Johnson. It gave him the emotional upper hand, and it's what abusive, controlling people like Johnson sometimes do.
But one thing that quite often happens is threats to suicide. And this is to try and get the person who they're maybe losing to change their mind.
That was indeed the state of Johnson's mind. He would both use violence and threaten to end his own life. A controlling mechanism applied by a man who had already killed once. After she told him she intended to leave him, Johnson tried charm, bought her a box of chocolates. According to him, she rejected them.
Ivonne decides that she wants Theodore out of the house.
A very dangerous thing to do. He'd felt rejected by his first wife and killed. Would he kill again? In a North London police station, a call comes in.
1992, I was the Detective Chief Inspector in charge of the CID office at Holloway Police Station. I'm convinced it was a Sunday afternoon that the call came into the police station apparently from Theodore Johnson.
Emergency, which service?
When he himself calls the police and asks the police to go quickly to his flat because their child is on its own and he has to go and kill himself.
Was Ivonne dead at that point?
Well, he had left the flat and gone wherever he called us from. Remember, we were talking 1992, so not very many mobile phones and all that sort of thing. So I think the call came in from a call box. You need to go to that flat.
When asked where he's going to be, he explains that he's suicidal.
In a matter of minutes, police arrived. The caller had seemed distraught. They acted quickly.
There's a lady there and a child, so he was obviously concerned for the child, but knowing Theodore as we do know now, I'm afraid he intended to kill Ivonne, and he did succeed. But because he told us reasonably quickly, we got there, but couldn't save her.
Police were confronted by a tragic scene. A 2-year-old crying, her mother just yards away.
Unfortunately, that Ivonne Bennett had been strangled with a belt. Wasn't dead for very long, but unfortunately the officers couldn't save her. And the 2-year-old child was unharmed in one of the bedrooms.
Strangulation's a very intimate way to kill somebody. You have to get up close to them, you have to touch them, you can sometimes see their face, you can certainly hear them, and they will be struggling against you. So it's usually somebody that you have an emotional association with.
The reason he gives behind why he ends up killing Ivonne is the fact that she finds out that she's seeing another man, and it's at this point that he loses it. Again, there's something about this kind of hyper-masculine understanding of a certain respect he should be afforded.
There was no immediate sign of Theodore Johnson. Views differ on the motivation for what he did next.
He then, presumably struck by remorse and regret for what he's done, tries to kill himself by stringing himself up from a tree.
Just like in the case of the first murder, he's positioning himself as the victim. So he's not calling to say, I've done this, I'm the perpetrator. He's calling to say, I've done this, but actually, I'm not feeling stable. I'm feeling so bad that I'm gonna go and kill myself. And in fact, the way that he chooses to try and kill himself suggests that this wasn't an actual threat at all. He tries to hang himself with string.
Some investigators have never been convinced that his suicide attempt was truly motivated by remorse.
Theodore had gone then out to Bennett somehow in a park and tried to hang himself with a piece of string. Well, string's not going to work in those respects, so he didn't manage to do that properly.
So he made big proclamations. He'd call the police and say, this is what I'm about to do. But, you know, A, he'd give people a heads up of this is what they were about to do. You know, he's going to try and kill himself. But B, his methods, you know, seem very odd. You know, no one hangs himself with string that breaks.
The suicide attempt becomes vital in the story of Theodore Johnson. Sane people, the theory went at the time, do not choose to kill themselves. At the very least, it's an indication of someone who is not of sound mind. His record showed that he had threatened suicide before even tried it. But was this behaviour part of a pattern of assuming the role of victim? The abused husband who'd killed when suffering diminished responsibility. Now the man who longed to die, remorseful because he'd killed again. The local head of CID began making inquiries about Theodore Johnson and did not expect to discover what was on his file.
Obviously we go to check people's backgrounds, their previous convictions, and as I recall, I think that was the only one he had, was previously killing his wife up in Wolverhampton. Circumstances of that one came to us again as quite a surprise that he had pushed his first wife off a 9th floor balcony. It's appeared to me from what I read about it and research that it was a very deliberate killing.
That was a conclusion that Detective Nichol reached. The facts seemed to suggest it. So he was surprised at the outcome that he was now reading about. A verdict of manslaughter.
But to me, that was murder as opposed to he was convicted of manslaughter.
Theodore Johnson had been released just 2 years after being convicted for his first killing. Was he about to claim diminished responsibility again and so have a murder charge reduced to manslaughter? Murder brings an automatic life sentence. Manslaughter can mean a much shorter time behind bars. If Theodore could prove a mental issue had caused the second killing of a woman, maybe he would be sent to a hospital facility. His suicide attempt established that he was not sane enough to be held responsible for murder. Surely, history could not repeat itself.
So even if people were prone to understanding and couching sort of that first murder, you know, as a spouse who'd kind of been abused for so long that he reached the end of his tether, now that really calls everything into question, right? This has happened twice. There's been reports of domestic violence and the modus of not only how he operates around women, but how he then positions himself as victim is something that's happened almost identically twice in a row.
As difficult as it appears now to believe, Theodore Johnson did indeed argue diminished responsibility again. Was he about to avoid being found guilty of murder for a second time? In 1992, Theodore Johnson appeared before a court at the Old Bailey. He denied murdering Ivonne Bennett, his second partner, claiming he was mentally unwell at the time. Amongst the evidence he offered, his failed attempts at taking his own life.
Certainly his history of suicide attempts may have been seen more as a mental health issue than a control issue, and that actually might have supported his diminished responsibility plea.
The court accepted that his attempt at hanging himself from a tree with a string was evidence of a disturbed mind.
He was able to plead manslaughter by reason of diminished responsibility and ended up yet again being sent to a mental institution rather than to prison.
His admittance to a psychiatric unit is quite strange, but there were other things that came into the picture, like depression, and he had a history of suicide attempts, which probably made it look more like he was a man with mental illness problems.
And off he went. It was a manslaughter plea of guilty, diminished responsibility, and he was given a hospital order. Now that's a secure hospital, and in most cases, and as I say, my anticipation at that time would be he'd be in for a very long time, if not forever.
At least for those who felt he should have been found guilty of murder, there was some consolation. It was unlikely Johnson would ever be released from a secure unit. For criminologist Jane Monckton-Smith, the verdict was a byproduct of different times. Though there's no defence of crime of passion, domestic murders are often seen in that context.
We're very, very used to using the crime of passion to rationalise these kinds of homicides. We have done for years and years and years. I mean, going back decades, we've used the crime of passion to understand domestic homicide. And what Theodore Johnson was saying was just underlining what we think we already know about this kind of killing. So it doesn't surprise me that it was successful.
Theodore Johnson, father of 3, killer of 2 partners, was locked up, very possibly never to be released. Except he was. He convinced carers he was no longer a risk.
People like Theodore Johnson, who have that type of personality disorder, will be very, very good at manipulation. Their whole life depends on it, really. They have to manipulate their victims. They have to manipulate the people around them to get what they want.
By the late 90s, Theodore Johnson was again on the outside.
We did discover, or the family contacted us some year later, I think they'd seen him in the street somewhere with an escort, allegedly some hearing to do with the daughter, the child. And what I thought, that's all right, he's got an escort, he's out for that reason and that reason only. And now I discover, all these years later, he wasn't in for much more than 2 years. 2 years for his second killing.
Out, he's allowed to temporarily leave the institution where he is to commence a course in furniture restoration, trying presumably to rehabilitate him for life in the future. This is a man who's killed 2 partners.
Members of Ivonne Bennett's family couldn't believe that they'd seen Johnson out on the streets.
Oh, absolutely, astounded, and so were we. They're ridiculous.
Ironically, those who investigated Johnson have always accepted that women he randomly meets are safe from harm. It was not they who Johnson would ever want to kill. To know him, to be intimate with him, however, was to put yourself in grave danger.
We totally accept he's no danger to the normal lady in the street. Women who are strangers to him are no danger whatsoever, I don't think. But start a relationship with him and you're in severe danger.
Sometimes, and on day release, Johnson was escorted, but not always.
But of course that also left him free to meet potential partners, and that would have been important to him.
He's allowed to leave again on unescorted visits to gain an apprenticeship around furniture restoration, and it's during one of these visits that he meets Angela Beth.
Angie Best is oblivious to the danger that she's in.
When he met Angela Best, the chances that she would be killed were very, very high. That does not mean that it was inevitable that he was going to kill her, but if you look at the timeline of how these things play out, if there was something that came along, like a separation, then it would become more inevitable.
At first, the temporary arrangement between a man she would meet only by day lessened Angela's chances of coming to any harm. But if Johnson was able to convince the authorities he was now safe to be permanently released, Angela would be in grave danger if Johnson's record was anything to go by. And he was about to get lucky for a third time.
About a year after he started this course and started being released temporarily from the institution, Theodore Johnson's able to convince a mental health tribunal that he should be released permanently, and he is.
A stipulation is added to the conditions of Johnson's release. He could not start a relationship with another woman.
Where there's been a history of domestic abuse and there's been serious violence, it's not unusual for there to be license conditions that that person has to inform the authorities when they are starting a new relationship. So it doesn't surprise me that that condition was put on Theodore Johnson.
However, a mere condition was not something that some officers felt would be a deterrent to the twice convicted killer.
Well, what can I say? What a weak condition to your release. Because, am I going to tell you? Because you'll be possibly put back in.
He wouldn't want anything to come in between him and that relationship. And if he thought that the police or the probation service were going to tell his partner about his past, that would have been a significant threat to him. He probably would have tried to hide it.
So I'm not going to tell you. And unless you start visiting at odd hours or putting surveillance units onto him, well, you don't do that. He just carried on.
In fact, he starts a 15-year-long relationship and nobody knows. Despite what was going on, he must have had some degree of charm, an ability to connect with women, to keep them engaged.
Johnson had killed 2 long-term partners. How could he justify starting a third significant relationship? Having a woman in his life is something that Johnson appears to simply have needed.
There's obviously something in his past that has destabilised him in some way. He maybe doesn't feel safe in the world, he didn't feel loved, lots of different things like that. And he feels that he can get those things through a relationship, but it's a relationship he has to own and control. So whenever he comes out of prison, the first thing he's going to do is go and seek out another partner.
And his third long-term partner, Angela Best, seemed happy enough with Theodore.
So when he's released, he actually moves in with Angela Best. So he's lying on both sides. To the authorities, he's lying and saying, no, there's no relationship with a woman, even though he's living with someone immediately.
He manages to keep his past secret from her, keep the fact of his relationship with her away from the authorities, and perhaps crucially, she, Angela Best, has no idea for 15 years that she's living with this man who's killed his last 2 partners.
He's lying to her consistently as well.
She does soon suffer the same fate as the 2 women he had killed.
So it became clear that he hadn't changed at all, really. It had just taken him a little bit longer to get to the stage where openly he was abusive to Angela. But he clearly had treated her in the same way as he'd treated his other 2 partners.
In 2006, 2011, 2015 and November 2016, Theodore Johnson, in planned meetings with his probation officer, lied by denying he was in a relationship, and he was believed. In the warped world of Theodore Johnson, a woman he barely knew was safe. And when things are going well in a relationship with Johnson, a woman seems to have been safe. How would Angela Best's time with Theodore work out?
So they're in this relationship for 15 years before Angela Best actually finds out about Theodore's passing.
I think it's very difficult to try to imagine what it must feel like having been involved in a committed relationship for 15 years with somebody who's got two such dark and terrible secrets and kept them from you.
It's at this point that she leaves.
By leaving him, she had rejected him. By discovering about his past, she was endangering him. She could report the relationship that he had with her, so exposing that he had breached the conditions of his release.
And I guess there must be a real fear in her mind as well that I've just split up with him, or I'm just trying to split up with him. And is this how it's going to end for me as well? You know, do I need to be especially careful now?
She did. Johnson only knew one way of dealing with things when relationship issues caused him to get angry. He killed. Angela Best had left Theodore Johnson. Soon after, he hears she may be in another relationship.
It's not until he finds out that she's seeing another man that he asks her to come back.
Johnson was at his most dangerous, and just before Christmas 2016, Angela was on the way to see him.
On the 16th of December 2016, Angela Best is going to help Theodore Johnson with an appointment that he has at the Jamaican Embassy.
When this kind of thing happens, the person has manipulated a situation where they are going to be alone with the person they want to kill.
Unlike the other two cases, which seem to happen in the moment, out of fury, in the case of Angela Best, he decides to call her back. There seems to be a sense of premeditation here. So he calls her back to his house, asking for help to fill out some forms. And she obliges. She comes back. This is someone that she's known for 15 years.
We know she leaves their former home to go to him, and that she arrives where he's staying at about 9:20 that morning. During the course of the rest of that morning, her son wants to get in touch with his mum. He's phoning up, but gets no answer. And nothing's heard from either of them until at 3:25 or thereabouts that afternoon at Cheshunt in Hertfordshire. A man throws himself under a train on the railway line. Police are called to that incident, and they find that that man is Theodore Johnson. And he's badly injured. He's lost limbs, he's in a bad way, but he's alive.
Again, he went off to commit suicide. Threw himself in front of a train, and again failed, other than causing himself severe injury. No consideration for the people on the platform, or the driver, or anything of that sort, or the medical people that have to look after him.
An attempted suicide can be a telltale Johnson sign. It can mean a woman is dead at his hands.
And so police go to the address they have for him, which is the address in Tufnell Park in North London, where he'd lived with Angela Best. When police go there, they get no answer, and they go in, fearing the worst. And indeed, they find that Angela Best has been murdered. Lying by a sofa, and she's dead.
She was hit with a hammer several times, in fact 6 I think the post-mortem report said, and strangled with a cord from a dressing gown. So there you have, between the first, second and third cases, violent hitting, strangulation, so the third one was a culmination of the first 2. But I'm afraid eventually the circumstances came round. She wanted to stop the relationship, he didn't, and the poor lady paid with her life. Let down from every angle, I'm afraid.
Was the latest suicide attempt a prelude to a defence of diminished responsibility? Perhaps not. In his attempt, Johnson lost an arm and a hand. This time, his attempt at suicide seemed genuine.
Despite the fact that he survived jumping in front of the train, he probably did want to kill himself. It was after a third homicide. He must have known that he wasn't going to get away with it a third time. It may be that he wanted to maintain control of his own life and his own decisions, and it was his decision to end his life, so that's what he was going to do.
Now retired, Detective David Nichol learned about the details of the latest Johnson killing, a man he thought he had helped put away for the rest of his life.
Well, I read the headline in the newspapers and really couldn't believe it. When I read down through the article and found it was Theodore Johnson, I was, well, disappointed, to put it mildly. I wouldn't like to say how disgusted I was that he had killed for a third time, and then to discover that he had got out so quickly after the conviction on the case I dealt with.
Why had he done it? What was it that the diminutive Johnson wanted most in his life? Was it to have a female partner, or was it to dominate a female partner? A question for psychologist Linda Papadopoulos as she considers what went on inside the mind of the serial killer Theodore Johnson.
A lot of his actions speak to his need for control. So while things were going his way, it seems that it was fine. As soon as someone, came out of line, he would, it seems, resort to violence. And this was evidenced by how often he was, called the police in to kind of deal with domestic disputes. And then ultimately, the fact that time and time again, 3 partners in a row end up being killed when he feels somehow that he's been disrespected, somehow when he's lost that control.
True to form, when Theodore Johnson was accused of killing Angela Best, he refused to accept it was murder. He did indeed look as if he was attempting to get the charge downgraded to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. There was a real possibility that he would again escape a life sentence.
Theodore Johnson was charged with murdering Angela Best, and he denied it. And he denied it right up until the first day of his trial at the Old Bailey in January 2018.
He wouldn't have had any idea what he put his victims through, because he would only be seeing things from his perspective. And his narrative in court would have had no insight at all to what actually happened. Everything would have been a manipulation.
It was part of a game, one Johnson had won before. A lighter sentence for a lesser crime had been his reward. But, probably advised that he had slim chance this third time, he had a change of heart.
And decided to plead guilty to murder. So there was none of the trying to prove provocation or diminished responsibility that had happened with his previous 2 cases. This time he just admitted straight up, yes, I killed her. And that gave the judge no option but to sentence him to life imprisonment, because the minimum sentence for murder is life imprisonment, and that's fixed by law.
Still, the Johnson cat-and-mouse game that he played with the justice system continued. The judge recommended a 26-year minimum prison term, which would have made Johnson 90 years old on release.
He, presumably on advice, appealed that length of time, and the Court of Appeal looked at it and decided, yes, it ought to be altered, but it ought to be put up. And they raised that figure to 30 years. So he will spend 30 years in prison before he can even be considered for release.
Ivonne Johnson had been thrown from the balcony of a high-rise flat after being beaten repeatedly with the nearest weapons that Theodore could find. Her sin was to ask Theodore to dress well for church.
So this was very much about ensuring that they knew who was boss, that they didn't step out of the parameters, that he felt represented this man that he needed to be in his eyes, this kind of hierarchy of who was in charge, who was in control.
Ivonne Bennett had been strangled with her belt. Her sin in the eyes of Johnson was to fail to submit to the regular beatings that she received.
I think what we're seeing here is someone that possibly felt less than, perhaps because of his size, perhaps of his experiences of being devalued or not respected by those around him.
The sin of Angela Best was to have uncovered the truth about the man who hadn't told her of the 2 others he'd already killed.
So that when he found someone that was in his life, he felt in order to control them, he had to subjugate them. He had to be the powerful one, to put them in line.
The 3 women, unwittingly, had become a unique part of recent English legal history. In his 46 years as a Met detective, David Nichol had never seen such a case. Theodore Johnson is a unique serial killer.
in the circumstances of killing, serving a sentence, killing, serving a sentence and killing again. The last time I researched it, I think there was 60 plus cases over several decades who had killed, served a full sentence for murder, as in life sentence, come out and killed again. But nobody, and I'm afraid I rather told the relatives of Ivonne Bennett that we wouldn't expect to see him out for an awful long time. We were let down by the system all round, I'm afraid. Most people, the vast majority, having killed a second time, just get such a long sentence that they don't come out and they don't kill a third time. I think it's almost unheard of.
Theodore Johnson lost both of his hands after his latest suicide attempt and will not be released, if at all, until he is 94 years old.